Hello and welcome to this evening's UCSF Virtual Alumni Program, UCSF Alumni Author Series, a conversation with Linda Shiue, MD. My name is Mario Peraza and I'm the Executive Director of Alumni Relations at UCSF. Before we start tonight's program, I would like to review a few housekeeping items to help with your experience. To submit a question during the presentation, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please keep your questions brief, and given the size of the audience, the number of questions, our speaker may not be able to answer everything. We hope you enjoy the conversation. So to introduce our speaker tonight, our author is Linda Shiue. She is a physician, chef, and founder of a teaching kitchen for patients. Her cooking classes showcase seasonal produce, lavishly flavored with spices and fresh herbs. Her food writing has been published widely and she has been interviewed frequently on television and in print. Dr. Shiue has served as faculty at UCSF, Stanford University, and serves on the board of the San Francisco Marin Food Bank. She is a graduate of Brown University, San Francisco Cooking School, UCSF, and the kitchen of Michelin-starred restaurant Murad here in San Francisco. She also has a certificate in plant-based nutrition from Cornell University. We're really excited to hear more about Dr. Shiue and her new cookbook, Spicebox Kitchen, just published this year. Finding the balance between a clinical career while at the same time working a bit outside the box with Spicebox Kitchen has, I can only imagine, been challenging. We're so excited to chat and cook with you, Linda. So if I can have Linda come on.
Thanks so much, Mario, and welcome everybody. I'm really excited to share my cookbook with you today, Spicebox Kitchen, as you can see here, and tell you a little bit about how I came about combining a career with medicine and food in a way that's been professionally and personally very rewarding, and hopefully a new take on approaching healthcare and medicine. So as Mario mentioned, I'll be talking about the book. I'll be sharing some pictures from the book and talking about the general organization of it. And I thought I would start, though, by reading an excerpt from my introduction, which I've titled My Journey from the Clinic to the Kitchen. So as Mario mentioned, I am a graduate of UCSF. I was a resident in the primary care internal medicine program at UCSF and SFGH, now ZSFG, from 1998 to 2001. And after that, I started my career in primary care. And it was about 10 years ago, though, that I started along this journey of integrating food into my practice. So I'll tell you a little bit about how that happened. Eating well is about food and health, but equally about celebration and community. There's a world of flavor, and the passport is spices. I connected my lifelong love of food and cooking to my work as a physician when I wrote this 8 years ago, but actually 10 years ago now, when I attended a medical conference that transformed the way I practiced medicine after a decade as a primary care doctor. At that time, I was feeling burned out. I knew that I was helping my patients, but I didn't feel that I was making an impact in the way that I really wanted. Despite my support and advice, my patients struggled to lose weight, to control their cholesterol and blood pressure and blood sugar, and they were tired, anxious, and depressed. I wrote many prescriptions for cholesterol medications, blood pressure medications, diabetes medications, and for antidepressants and sleep aids. My patients didn't necessarily feel better, and I didn't feel that effective. Then I went to the CME course, which was really fateful for my career. It's called Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives, and it's co-sponsored by the Harvard School of Public Health and the Culinary Institute of America. At the conference, we reviewed the latest updates in nutrition science and how this knowledge could help patients. Importantly, we were also taught to cook incredibly delicious food that was also health supportive by the culinary school's chef instructors. That was my light bulb moment. My practice changed immediately. Literally before, at the end of routine physical examinations, I review my findings for the patient, discuss their weight, blood pressure, and lab results, and make some vague suggestions for modifying their diets and exercise routines. Typically, it might have ended there. But after this conference, after my epiphany, and with my next patient, I pulled out my prescription pad. This is when we still had paper prescriptions, and wrote a recipe for kale chips. And a week after the conference ended, I taught my first cooking class to patients, and I was hooked. Before that, I'd never taught cooking to anyone, didn't really know what I was doing, but I found that I really loved it. And it was the connection and the really feeling that I was helping people that was so different from my previous 10 years of practice. So I shifted my practice to include culinary medicine, a new evidence-based field that blends the art of food and cooking with the science of medicine. And I did this to address some dismal statistics. About 75% of primary care visits are due to lifestyle-related conditions. Half of premature deaths are attributable to our overfed yet malnourished society. And only 10% of Americans meet nutrition guidelines. So I have found that practicing culinary medicine is a low-cost, accessible, and culturally adaptable intervention that I really enjoy. So I continued this for a while, teaching cooking classes, giving recipes to patients. And then a few years after I began to teach cooking, I decided that I wanted to get really serious about this. So in 2016, I took a sabbatical from my practice. I actually left my previous practice and I went to culinary school here in town at the San Francisco Cooking School, which I cannot recommend enough. It was amazing. And then I also did a certificate in plant-based nutrition from Cornell. I did both of those things with the goal in mind that I would start a cooking program for patients. So I founded the Thrive Kitchen, which is at Kaiser Permanente here in San Francisco, and which until the pandemic had live in-person hands-on cooking classes for patients once a month. They're now virtual, just like this presentation, which is not the same thing at all, but still better than not having any cooking classes. And so that's what I've continued to this day. So just to read a little bit more from the introduction, the best way I've found to make transitioning to eating more healthfully a joy is to bring in flavors from around the world. My food influences have always been global and wide ranging ever since I was a child. And I love the adventures that you can have in your own kitchen just by exploring different spices. So that's why the theme of my cookbook is spices. I believe that the best way to get to know a culture is to sit down and break bread or roti or a bowl of rice or a bowl of noodles with the people in another culture. What I cook and what I teach in my cooking classes and the recipes in this book are inspired by people I've met from around the world, both from my upbringing with immigrant parents from Taiwan, from studying abroad in Singapore, working abroad in China before I went to medical school, and really from my travels, where I've always tried to take a cooking class or at least explore the local markets. So this cookbook shares my love of flavors from around the world with my unique perspective and nutrition knowledge as a physician and professionally trained chef. Whereas most healthy cookbooks focus on nutrition over flavor, these recipes celebrate eating for pleasure. And I really think this is the key difference that can help me connect with my patients and truly encourage them to make changes that they can sustain in their lives. At my table, food is meant to be savored. I won't prescribe you a diet in the strict sense, advise you to count calories or tell you what to eat, because I really believe that food choices should be personal and that the best diet for one person may not be the best for another. All of that is to say that I haven't written, the latest, greatest diet book that is one size fits all for everyone. However, I do recommend that everyone eat mostly plants for many reasons. Right now, these days with the wildfires raging, the environment is a big one of those, but also for taste, variety, ethical concerns, and of course, health. My goal as a physician is to improve patients' health by inspiring them to cook more and eat more vegetables. My goal as a cooking instructor and recipe developer is to get people to love and crave those vegetables by showing them the many ways to prepare them deliciously. And so that is all the history behind why I do what I do and why I wrote this cookbook here. So now I'm going to show you some slides that will show you what the cookbook looks like, and then talk about that a little bit, talk about what I think are the most important ingredients to have in a healthy diet. And then I will show you a very brief cooking demo that illustrates some of these points. And then we'll get to the fun part, which is trying to answer as many of your questions as possible. All right. So here's a close-up picture of the cover, which showcases a bunch of spices. And so I'll talk a little bit about, why spices. This is kind of just a summary of what I just gave, the rundown of my training. So I did the internal medicine residency, went to cooking school, did a certificate in plant-based nutrition, founded Thrive Kitchen, which is a picture of. So basically a pop-up kitchen in conference room where we cook a full meal and enjoy it together. And I do want to add, for any of you who may be Kaiser members in San Francisco, we've just made the online virtual cooking classes free for San Francisco Kaiser members. So you can please sign up if you are one of those. And they're low cost for anyone else, $20. And then I published this cookbook that we're going to talk about today. So as I mentioned, culinary medicine is defined as the art of food and cooking blended with the science of medicine. What I like to say about it is that it's a practical, flexible, and culturally adaptable clinical tool that empowers patients. So from the perspective of someone who takes care of patients, I consider this yet another tool in my toolbox or my doctor's bag. And my approach, as I mentioned, is a flavor first approach. So spices, and this is a picture of an Indian spice box or masala daba, are a way to bring in flavors from anywhere. You can, if you learn one basic recipe or recipe template, but use different spices, you can make it taste like something from India, taste like something from East Asia, taste like something from Spain, taste like something from Mexico, with the same base ingredients, but with different flavors. So that is one of the two main reasons that I focus on spices. The other is that spices were our first medicine. They're anti-inflammatory. They have many health properties. They have antioxidants, they contain nutrients. So they're also very powerful medicine, and a very kind of literal sense of food is medicine. And so I really encourage people to investigate spices more. The other things that I talk about in this book a lot are key ingredients that are plant-based that will enhance anyone's nutrition. One of those first groups are legumes. So legumes, of which we have this endless variety, are a source of obviously protein, but also fiber, antioxidants, and other nutrients. So a great thing to include in your diets. Just another picture of many varieties of legumes. Second category are leafy greens. So, people always ask me, what is the most important thing I should add? And I mentioned legumes as just an alternative protein source. And then I mentioned leafy greens. There's an endless variety of leafy greens. This one that I'm showing here is one that most people are not familiar with. And if we were not in webinar format, I would try to get people to guess what these are, but I'll just tell you, these are the leaves of the taro plant. Most people are familiar with eating, or might be familiar with eating the root of taro, which is a tuber, but the leaves are also a great source of nutrition. They end up being similar to spinach. You can use them like spinach, and locally you can find these in Asian supermarkets, especially any of the locations of 99 Ranch. You can always find them there. So that's kind of a fun one to include, and there is a recipe in the book that includes this. Leafy greens may not also look like, your kale, your collard greens, your spinach. Think about leafy greens in other forms, like these Brussels sprouts here. This is from the recipe in the cookbook for what I call gateway Brussels sprouts, because this is the recipe that I developed for one of my first cooking classes. A lot of people think they don't like Brussels sprouts, but I literally had one of those former Brussels sprouts haters licking her plate after this. So that is another leafy green that you can consider. And then the third category is whole grains. So whole grains are, people love to eat carbs. Rice and other grains are a staple in many different cultures, but a lot of us eat refined versions of these, and you'll get a lot more nutrition out of the whole grains. So I explore that throughout all the sections of the cookbook. This one is another whole grain, which is bulgur. So in addition to recipes and talking about what I think about as being the healthiest ingredients to have in your diet, I like to, in the cookbook, give a very simple approach to nutrition. I start out actually in the first about 50 pages of the cookbook with what I call Healthy Cooking 101. In this section, I go over things on how to meal plan, how to transition to a healthier eating pattern if you're not currently eating in this way, in a way that includes a lot of plants and whole grains, simple ways to approach that, how to stock your pantry. And I also go over a whole glossary of healthy ingredients, including spices. I talk about spices, leafy greens, other vegetables, their nutrition properties, and also importantly, how to cook with them. In terms of probably the easiest nutrition message from the book, I like to talk about eating the rainbow. So this is a recipe, a picture of the recipe for gado-gado, which is an Indonesian salad in the book. And I, adapted that from the traditional recipe to include all these different colors, because one of the simplest ways to make sure that you are getting all of your nutrients is to eat all the different colors of the rainbow. So I like to show this slide to illustrate that point. As for the recipes, I showcase 4 main different regions of different cultures, just to give you something, one, interesting to diversify what you're eating so that, you don't have this sense that many people have that healthy food is boring or bland. Showcasing the many different cultures around the world, which have in their standard formats, in their traditional forms, lots of healthy ingredients. So I start in California, where we are, and where I moved for residency many years ago. This is a recipe for an oatmeal with ginger and oranges and pistachios. And then on the other side, it's a recipe for chilaquiles. The next section is in Asia. Lots of East Asian, Southeast Asian, and some South Asian recipes. Here I have recipe for scallion pancakes and also what I call my celebration red salad. Again, building on many different colors to add different flavors, textures, flavors, and nutrients to your diet. I move on to the Mediterranean and the Middle East. And that is where, for 2 reasons. One, the Mediterranean diet is one of the best studied diets that we have great evidence that prolongs life and reduces the risk of cardiovascular disease. And also because I love the food of the Mediterranean, and I did my externship during culinary school at Marab, which is kind of a Californian modern Moroccan restaurant. So I love the food of those areas. They use a lot of spices, and so that was why I included that section as well. And then finally, I have a section on Trinidad, which is probably one of the sections that is most unique to this cookbook and that most people, especially here on the West Coast, are not familiar with. The food of Trinidad has a lot of influence from India, and because of that, a lot of spices. The modern Trinidadian diet right now does incorporate a fair amount of meat, but for this section, I've made it only plant-based and some pescatarian recipes. And I'm familiar with this, not because I grew up with it, because I married somebody from Trinidad, so I'm very familiar with that cuisine. And I think it's one that people have been asking a lot of questions about because they're not familiar with it. And so it's really one of the few cookbooks out there where you can learn about that cuisine. So with that said, it is time to move on to my brief recipe demo for edamame hummus. So this kind of combines 2 of those sections. One is the Mediterranean, where hummus is from, but typically involves chickpeas, and then bringing it into actually another culture using edamame, which is more used in Japanese and other East Asian cultures. And so let me see if I have another slide I want to show you before I show you my screen. This is just a thank you for coming. You'll see this again at the end. Show you my social media handles. There's a link to the cooking classes, but you can just Google Kaiser Thrive Kitchen cooking classes, and where you can get copies of signed cookbooks, including locally Omnivore Books, where I'll be having a live event in person this coming Saturday at 3 to 4 p.m. It's free, so if any of you are available, I welcome to come there. You can meet me. I'll sign your books there. There are a few signed copies at Green Apple Books on the park, just down the street from you at Parnassus, and also at Copperfield's Books in Napa. So I'm going to take the slides off now so that you can see my demo, and then we'll have a chance for questions at the end. Okay, Great. So I'm going to make sure this is going to be the area that I'll be focusing on to make our hummus. It's a very brief recipe, simple recipe, very tasty, but it's a good way to illustrate some of these points I made about nutrition and also how to make your food taste good. So all you need for this is really a very small food processor. This is one of those mini prep ones, 3 or 4 cup capacity. And we're literally going to just put all of our ingredients in and blend it in together. So we have our edamame. So you can get this already frozen, cooked, and shelled. I have a cup of edamame here. I'm going to add to the bowl of the food processor. And then we have our tahini. So this is what really gives it the flavor of any standard hummus. So tahini is made of sesame seeds. And I'll talk a little bit about the nutrition after I finish putting this together. So most of the nutrition, because these are most of the ingredients in this, are from the tahini and the edamame. To this, I'm going to add just a few more ingredients, some olive oil, which is going to emulsify together with this, a clove of garlic, and then the zest of 1 large or 2 small lemons. So I'm going to show you, this is a very handy thing to have in your kitchen, which is a microplane or other zester. It's a rasp style zester, which is basically from a wood shop. And it's really handy for zesting things. You can also grate a little bit of dark chocolate with it. It can be used for nuts in a way that you might use Parmesan cheese if you want to substitute that for a topping for your pasta. It's good for grating also things like fresh ginger. So really handy. As you can see, I'm just using this to get just the yellow part of the lemon and not the white pith, which is a little bit bitter, and putting it directly into the food processor bowl. And I'm just going to tap it on the side, and that will bring all of the zest into there. So we're using our lemon in 2 ways here. One is for the zest and one is for the juice. So I'm also going to juice directly into the bowl here. You don't need to get one of these citrus squeezers, but it's handy to have. It both filters out the seeds and squeezes out the juice efficiently. So this lemon juice is going to bring a really fresh and vibrant and bright taste into the hummus. And it's also a traditional ingredient when you're making regular hummus as well. A few other things, just a little bit of salt, which you'll want to adjust to taste. And then I have some water, but I'm going to, that's if we need to thin it out. So it depends on how juicy your lemon is. So I recommend saving the water till the end, even though I didn't write that exactly that way in the recipe, and then just adding it after you see what your consistency is like. So all of that is in the bowl, and I'm just going to turn that on. You can watch it grind together. And this comes together in really just a minute. I apologize for the sound. Hopefully it's not too loud. All right, so you'll want to blend this until it's pretty smooth. In the interest of not subjecting you to that sound for too long, I'm just going to actually check the texture for now. I do want it to be a little bit looser, so I'm adding some of the water that I called for in the recipe. And I'm just going to grind it one more time, and then I'll stop. But you'll want to do this to the point where it's really nice and smooth and creamy. Okay, So I'm going to transfer this to a bowl and plate it with a crudité platter, and then talk a little bit about the nutrition. Make sure I can get this in a place that you can see it. So you can see it's a really pretty color. It's like a very light green, a very spring-like color. And you can literally make, use the same proportions of ingredients to make a hummus with any sort of legume that you like. I've done one with cooked red lentils, with white beans. So it's not just chickpeas, although chickpeas are great. But if you want to have some variety in flavor and color, and also each legume has slightly different nutrition, you can just substitute anything else. So this is what it looks like. I feel like the light is shining a bit brightly on it. Let me pull back a little bit, see if I can get a better look. I think you can't see it too well, but you should make this, and hopefully some of you are making this at home since it's so simple. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to garnish it with to kind of bring this again back into the flavor category of Asia, just to kind of give a little variety. I'm going to use a spoon to make a little well in it. And with the regular chickpea hummus, this is where you might be adding a little bit of olive oil for swirl. I'm going to use some toasted sesame oil instead, just to go with the flavor theme that I'm going with here. Okay, so we have a little sesame oil. And then I'm going to bring in some thinly sliced green onion as a fresh garnish. So I recommend, as another both culinary and nutrition tip, to always add some sort of fresh herb or aromatic, both for nutrition and flavor and for appearance. So we have a little garnish there. Also in theme, I'm going to add some furikake, which is the Japanese rice seasoning that typically has seaweed and toasted sesame seeds and some other things. So I'm just going to add that to the top. And you could also add some ground ginger here if you wanted as well. So this is pretty different from your standard Mediterranean style hummus, but it's the same basic idea. And it goes really well with, crudités. So fresh vegetables, which I'll show you here all together. And maybe a couple of Japanese rice crackers too. So this is what it looks like here. So as you can see here, this is going to be a way to show you how to eat the rainbow. So as I mentioned, eating the rainbow, different colors correspond to different nutrients, to different antioxidants. It also looks really good. So one of the other key things I like to always communicate is, no matter how simple your recipes are, including with this hummus, which is basically blending things together, you want to make it look good, have it garnished, make it enjoyable, even if, or maybe even especially if it's just for yourself. We eat with our eyes first, and feeling satiated is not just about having a full stomach. It's about all the different senses and all the pleasure you get from a beautifully plated plate of food, from different textures that make it interesting, and of course different flavors. So here we have, some cherry tomatoes, good source of vitamin C and lycopene. We have oranges, good source of beta carotene, and you see it, cut it beautifully as well. That makes it enjoyable too. We have some yellow cherry tomatoes, some green cucumbers. I have some purple haze carrots just to add out different colors in the rainbow. And then we have our light green edamame hummus here. And in terms of the nutrition of the hummus, even though this is a very simple recipe, a very simple snack, you are getting the benefits of the edamame, which are protein, fiber, as well as some B vitamins, potassium, and magnesium. And then the tahini, which is the other main ingredient in this, is made from sesame seeds. So sesame seeds, like all seeds and nuts, are a good source of minerals and other trace elements that we may not get elsewhere. In particular, they're a good source of selenium, which is an important antioxidant, and of zinc, important for immune systems. And there's also some iron and calcium there. So simple snack or appetizer pre-dinner right now. You can also use the edamame as a sandwich spread, or as the base of a sandwich. So many different ways of enjoying it. simple recipe. It's also very inexpensive. So you can, it's always better to make your own hummus. It's so easy to make and you can have a lot of variety with it. So those are just some of the reasons why I wanted to use that as a very simple illustration. And that is the end of my recipe demo here. So I think we have time to start with some of the questions here, Mario.
Yeah, thank you so much, Linda. That is amazing. And I am very excited to make that soon. I'm like, yeah, very, very excited. It sounds delicious. We have lots of questions. We have some that folks submitted ahead of time, and quite a few that have come in already. So I'll kind of run through them, try to keep them on a theme, but hopefully we have time to answer them all. Okay. So these are some of the ones that came in earlier through registration, but someone was curious about how to, or any quick and easy recipes you might have to keep a family of 4 healthy, assuming this is probably with kids is what I'm just assuming from the question.
Yeah. So from that, and with that assumption that there might be kids involved, one of my other points is that there should not be kids food and adult food. And I think that is one thing that makes it hard for people to cook a lot, where they feel like they're making 2 dinners. And so let's say, the adults want to eat spicy food and they don't want to give that to their kids. I would say, to either set aside some of what they're making and, keep it plain for the kids and then add the spicier stuff later. Or to, basically slowly introduce kids to different flavors. But in terms of what are some simple recipes, that's really what my book is all about. All of these are meant to be, weeknight cooking recipes, things that you can make in half an hour to an hour. I also have, I think, what can be very helpful for people. I have made this grid of basically, it's hard to see here, but I just want to show you the grid format. For 4 weeks of a month, for each day of the week, a different category of recipes. So 7 times 4, you have a different recipe for each day of the month by learning really just, 4 to 7 types of recipes. So the categories we are, of the 7 categories, there's pasta, noodle, and rice dishes. Another category is tacos, wraps, and rolls. Another one is rice and beans, soups and stews, breakfast for dinner, entree salads, and a stir fry or saute. So those are the 7 categories. And I've broken it down week by week. So for each of those 7 categories, 4 different recipes for each week. And so the idea is that, you can basically learn how to make a few basic things and then adapt it to different flavors, as I was saying, with different spices, to make it seem like different recipes when they really aren't. So a few basic techniques can stretch a really long way. And so I think all of those are very family friendly. Again, pasta or noodle based dishes, wraps of different sorts, rice and beans, all of those things. So that's how I encourage you to feed a family. Make it quick, make it simple, and maybe also consider batch cooking. If you find that your weekdays or weeknights are very hectic, to cook a bunch of things in advance on the weekend that you can mix and match into different recipes. The most recent Thrive Kitchen class that I just taught was how to make grain bowls. And so for that, the advice is cook a bunch of different grains on the weekend. At the same time, cook a sheet pan or 2 of roasted vegetables, and maybe prepare a pot of beans or whatever your protein is going to be, and cook that in advance. And then make a few plant-based sauces. So one of the things that I focused on in this book as well is there's a whole section on pantry. So for each section, there's breakfast, lunch, dinner, a little bit of dessert, and then also pantry items that include things like this hummus, but it also include dressings and sauces. And that's where your flavor is. So if you make a few of those also in the beginning of the week, you can mix and match into different recipes throughout the week so that you're not really cooking from scratch every single day.
That's great. So a little bit more applicable, how can someone apply this information to their professional life? Obviously, we have alumni here a lot, everyone is in the health or science field. And specifically, are there jobs for nurses related to nutritional health?
So I would say that right now, I like to think that actually talking about food and nutrition is actually already part of all of our jobs as people who provide healthcare. But how you choose to approach that can integrate it, even more if you want to. I don't know that there are any very specific jobs yet. Like, I really invented my own job. So my official title is Director of Culinary Medicine at Kaiser. And I invented that. I left my previous job because they weren't ready for what I wanted to do. And I approached Kaiser with this and the reason for that is that during my commute to my previous job, I was always surrounded by Kaiser ads on buses, on billboards, on the radio. And because of that, I knew that they had the first farmers markets to be held at clinical sites, way back. It's going back more than 10 years now. And I know UCSF now has one as well, but Kaiser was the first. And I thought, okay, well, they've got the vegetables already. Do people know what to do with those? And that was really how I decided that I should do this. And so I think that if you're looking for a job, you're going to have to be pretty creative and have your eye on the prize, and just kind of, there's a lot of, serendipity, right place, right time, right people, to create a position that you think will work for you. That said, I think one of the jobs that has come up a lot more in the last several years is for health coaches of different sorts. So there are nutrition health coaches. There are many programs where you can certify in this. And definitely as a nurse, I think that is really, you have access to patients. If you get some training in health coaching, I think you could bring that into what you're already doing in your practice.
That's great. This was a question that someone asked, but I'm also very curious about it. But how does the cook start to move away from meat and more towards vegetables?
Yeah, so that is actually one of the things that I go through in my tips in my Healthy Cooking 101 section. And I think really the idea, and this is actually for people who want to, not even as a cook, but as an eater, improve their diets, is to not think of it as what you can't have, but by adding things. So if you're adding more delicious vegetables to your diet, you're automatically going to be reducing the amount of meat. It's just literally how much can you eat, right? So vegetables have a lot of fiber, they're very filling. And there's infinite variety. I actually find that, animal-based cooking is actually kind of monotonous. If you know how to cook meat, you know how to cook meat, and you know how to cook fish, you know how to cook fish. It's all the same after a while, but vegetables actually require a lot more creativity and different kinds of techniques and flavoring to make them interesting and to get the best out of them, to get the best flavor out of them. So I think it's actually, you'll find it fun. You'll find it fun. You'll find it that there's more variety with eating more vegetables. And if you add more of that to your diet and to what you're eating in your nightly menus, you'll find that the meat is the least interesting part of it. If you still want to eat meat and that works for you, that's great. But I think by going from, making that the center of your plate, make it actually a side dish or a condiment, something there that is there for flavor, for interest, and for, if you like it, for eating it. But it really shouldn't be the centerpiece. It should be at most, a quarter of what you're eating on your plate, and the rest should be mainly plant-based. So I think, again, just slowly introducing more vegetable recipes into your repertoire is a great way that you'll automatically reduce the amount of meat.
That's great. I was very related, but more about, I guess, persuading other people. This is a specific question, but the question comes and it says, we live in a retirement center in middle of America. Many residents are used to meat diets. What's the best approach to persuading the cooks and the residents to appreciate less meat?
Yeah, again, I think it all comes down to flavor, right? So all of this, like my genius idea here is not rocket science at all. It's not brain surgery, to use a more medical metaphor. It's like really the most basic thing. If we make the food taste good, people will eat it. That is really the key. And the opposite of that is by making people feel deprived by saying, yeah, this doesn't taste great, but it's good for you. No one is going to stick with that as much as you want to, or even if you need to. Like, there are people every second having heart attacks, and people hopefully coming to them and saying, you've got to change how you eat or else you're going to die. That is the most motivated someone will ever be. And yet, if you don't show them good food that tastes good, that is also healthy for them, they're not going to be able to stick with that. So I think when you're talking to an, institutional setting with cooking, again, ideally, you get cooks who are interested and want, most cooks like to cook good food. They want their food to taste good. They might be limited by the budget or whatever they're given, but I think they would like the challenge of making vegetables that taste really good. So I think if there's some way to talk to the people who are in charge of the food service and say, hey, let's try out, once a week, let's add, or maybe once a day even, let's add a new vegetable option. That could be a fun challenge for people. And vegetables are actually less expensive than meat. So it's kind of a a win-win in that, in thinking about that institutional setting. I think many of us might end up there as we age. We're an aging population. It actually behooves all of us to think about this. Like, how do we talk to this? How do we choose a place that will have the food that we want to eat? And maybe it starts with a conversation of, vegetables are good for all of us. Let's talk about ways of making it more the centerpiece of the show.
That's great. That's great. Sort of a regional related question, but and I don't know if this is specific to this recipe or maybe to your whole book, but are there alternative to the ingredients that are not easily found in geographic areas where you live? This person lives in the Southeast US.
Yeah, so one thing I'll say is now, for better for worse, with the internet, you can actually get anything at all. Like things, when I've traveled in the past, I will often bring back food, spices, condiments as a souvenir. And then I'll come back and I'll find the same thing like at a local grocery store. I mean, this is special to the Bay Area though, or at Cost Plus World Market, like the same exact thing that I thought I had discovered, right? Far away. But you can now, with the internet, you can get a lot of things like spices over the internet. And I do include some sources that I recommend in the book as well. But yes, you can substitute, really most of the base ingredients are things you can find in any market. Substitute any vegetable for any other vegetable. Any leafy green, you can substitute for another similar leafy green. So if I say you need to have kale, although I think you can get kale anywhere now, but and you can't find it, substitute collard greens or spinach, whatever greens that you have. For this edamame, it is widely available, I think, in most large supermarkets now in the freezer section. But if you can't get that, any bean will do. Whatever you have, whatever you like, you can substitute. So for, if you're looking at any of these other more difficult to find ingredients, substitute something similar. So for example, if I'm calling for a certain kind of dried pepper spice that you don't have, substitute red pepper flakes, whatever you have, or substitute paprika. It's not going to be exactly the same thing, but the same concept.
Mm-hmm. Great, that's great. So moving into some more health related questions. Can you speak to soy and cancer prevention?
Yeah, so this comes up often, and I do use tofu a lot in the Asia section of this book, and these are soybeans here. So I think the bottom line with soy, there was some concerns of, are soy products bad for you because they are considered phytoestrogens, which are estrogen-like plant-based substances, and there's some controversy around there. But overall, I would say if you get food made from soy, meaning not soy protein isolates, which are present in a lot of sort of, athletic supplements, because that's very concentrated. And I think the jury is a little bit out on if that's actually good for you or harmful for you. Whole soy foods are actually very helpful in terms of protein and in terms of fiber. And in fact, soy-based foods are thought to possibly decrease risk of prostate cancer and gastric cancer. And if eaten by premenopausal women, may even prevent breast cancer. So overall, I think it would be a stretch to say that you should add a large amount of soy specifically for the reason of preventing cancers, but that there are some studies that show that it might be preventive for some. And certainly that if you have a moderate amount in your diet, 1 to 2 servings per day, any oncologist would say that is safe for anyone, including people with breast cancer that might even be, sensitive to estrogen. So yes, 1 to 2 servings a day of soy products may be good for you.
Great. Should we avoid foods from the nightshade family? If so, I heard mixed reports. This is the question. Mixed reports if blueberries are considered nightshades.
Okay, I'll start with the end of that question. So blueberries are not nightshades. Nightshades are all the things that you'd find in like ratatouille, basically. So it's things like tomatoes, bell peppers, potatoes are in the nightshade family, and also eggplant. These are all things that I love to eat. So the question around nightshades comes around whether or not it causes an inflammatory response. And that is true for some people. So there are people who, this comes up when people might have like arthritic conditions, autoimmune disease, maybe just food intolerances, nightshades might be a category to explore, eliminating with the guidance of a dietitian or your doctor for a short period of time, and then reintroducing to see if things really change for you symptomatically. We don't have a lot of great laboratory tests that really will tell you definitively, can you eat nightshades or not? So it's really going to be one of these things that you have to try to eat it and try to eliminate it and see if that makes a difference for you.
Great. Speaking of anti-inflammatory, a question about turmeric in cooking, and is that also anti-inflammatory? As a supplement? Yeah, that was the question.
Okay, great. Yeah, so turmeric contains several different compounds, one of which is curcumin, and that's the one that's isolated and put into supplements. So this is actually one of the spices that we know the most about being an anti-inflammatory, and it actually works as the same way as a COX-2 inhibitor, so like Celebrex would. And so, that's really an example of spices being medicine. That said, the amount that you get from food would not be really enough to have a sort of pharmacologic effect, a dose-related effect, in which case you may want a supplement if you are taking it for a therapeutic purpose. Importantly, though, either way, you require ingesting curcumin with black pepper. There's a ingredient called piperine, which is in black pepper, freshly ground black pepper. So whether you're cooking with turmeric or having it in a supplement, try to have it in one that has black pepper with it, and you'll get much more bioavailability with it. But it definitely will help. So, kind of my approach, this is extrapolating to a question which I assume other people may have about spices. With both spices and with food, my recommendation is that you have it in its whole form. And the idea is that if you're having enough of this and a variety of this over time, you'll be getting some of the benefit from it. It's not going to be the same as in a supplement. However, supplements, whether they're for vitamins or for spices, you're missing a lot of other things, right? It's not holistic. It's not the whole thing. We're isolating one chemical, and that can never be the same as how we ingest it. So I recommend that you get most of your spices and whatever you're trying to get out of those spices for health properties and your vitamins through food, and then consider supplements to be just that, possibly an additive, but not the main thing that you want to have. You want to have actual whole food.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to combine these two questions. They're sort of similar about is there any nutritional properties that humans need that plants cannot provide? I'm thinking meat. And then the other question is that how do you answer people who are concerned about more protein in their meals? That's sort of like, I'm thinking like the paleo, keto, those diets that are very protein heavy.
Okay, so yes, so if people are going to have a completely plant-based or vegan diet, the one nutrient that you absolutely should supplement is vitamin B12, because that is only found in animal products. There are others that are a little bit more difficult to get from a plant-based diet. So you may also need these supplements. And actually many people who eat meat also need these supplements. So vitamin D3, calcium, and iron are the main ones there. And then on a fully plant-based diet, you might also need zinc and iodine, and think about omega-3 fatty acids. Those are all a little bit harder to get from plant sources as well. But the absolute most important one is vitamin B12. To make sure that you do take a supplement if you're not having any animal products at all. And then the question about protein. So protein, a lot of people, and certainly cooks in restaurants, protein means meat, pretty much. But protein is actually present in a lot of plant-based products, legumes for sure, but also, some vegetables that are very high in proteins that are not legumes are potatoes. And surprisingly to people, potatoes are actually good for you, including for protein. Broccoli, seeds and nuts are sources of protein. So there are many ways to eat kind of a protein-based diet, as you mentioned, with keto, paleo, and still eat plant-based. It does take a little bit more effort. I would recommend that someone who wants to eat that very specialized diet that is fully plant-based and maybe keto, to talk to a dietitian to make sure you're not missing things from that.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think of Beyond Meat and the Impossible brands?
Yes, I actually did some research on this because I was quoted in some magazine article about this a few years ago when this really all came out. So the biggest benefit of these plant-based meat substitutes are for the animals and for the environment and for the companies making them, but health-wise, they're actually not that much better. So in terms of saturated fat and sodium, both of those brands of Beyond Meat and Impossible have more sodium and saturated fat than beef, actually, which is shocking. I was shocked when I read that. I'm like, what is the point here then, actually? And so the point is really, obviously for any other reason that you're avoiding meat,
Right.
And for the environment, there's some benefit there. And I would say for someone, just thinking about the eater, if someone is really a meat lover and they're finding it really hard to move away from this could be a step in that direction. So just not to think that it's actually really that great for you. It's not.
Yeah. Okay, great. This is specific to Kaiser, but how can other Kaiser facility patients, Redwood City, San Jose, access your virtual cooking classes?
So they are available. They're just not free from other locations right now because we just started this literally last week.
Okay.
I'm hoping in the future, my goal in the future is that everyone across Kaiser and across the country and all the regions will have access to all of this. But small steps at a time. It was a big one to make it free for San Francisco, but you can certainly register and it's $20. It's still, I still think it's a great bargain. It's very heavily subsidized to have that. But there is also a website. If you look up Kaiser Permanente Health, and this is for anyone, Kaiser or not, Health Education San Francisco, I recorded 14 cooking videos that are very kind of basic cooking techniques approach to, I should have mentioned this before, how to become a plant-based eater. So that's available to anybody on the website. So if you look up Kaiser Health Education, Healthy Cooking, you'll find those videos as well as information on the cooking classes.
Great. I haven't read all your recipes, but someone asked, how do you make your own tahini? I'm not sure if you have a recipe for that.
I don't have a recipe for tahini, but I don't make my own tahini. But you could, if you get a Vitamix, so a high speed blender, and some sesame seeds. Supposedly, it's just like making peanut butter. You just put them in there and let it go, and then you've got your tahini. So it's like making any other nut butter. Yeah. But I haven't done it myself, so I can't really testify how well it comes out.
Okay. How do you see the pandemic and being at home has changed how people are approaching cooking at home and incorporating slow food into their lifestyle rather than drive-through and takeout meals?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the bright lights of the pandemic is that people were forced to cook more at home. And I think in the beginning, people were going all out and doing, everyone was making sourdough and making these things that they had time to do and they were trying to kill time. I think that's shifted away and people are kind of tired of complex things and cooking all the time. But I think that one thing is that people really who didn't cook all the time before found that they could do it. It wasn't hard and got kind of into a routine. And I think that is the key. Make it simple for yourself, save the complex stuff for a challenge or for a dinner party, but find simple things that you can make. That was really the idea behind the recipes in my book, which I wrote before the pandemic. But that the idea is that once you get used to it, you'll find that it actually is cheaper, tastes better, is better for your health, and is actually faster than getting takeout, because to get takeout, you have to actually go somewhere, order it, wait for it, purchase it, and get it home and eat it. You can do all of that within the half an hour that most of these recipes will take.
Right. And more expensive on takeout, I can only imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is an interesting question. Can you elaborate on how to incorporate your principles when we are working with unhoused or food insecure, otherwise marginalized communities, and of which we see a lot of in SF in the Bay Area?
So that's a challenge, actually. So I'll give you what my goal is. One of my other goals, and the goal when I started Thrive Kitchen, was to have a food pharmacy, which before the pandemic, a UCSF colleague, Rita Wen, had piloted in all of the community health centers with great success. So the idea behind a food pharmacy is that for patients who are food insecure and who need that first step of even getting to healthy ingredients, that we provide that through partnership with the food bank, where I'm on the board, and then provide that with some medical service, like either some nutrition talk or blood pressure check, and then show them really simple ways of making it. Now, that said, you still need something to be able to cook food. not all food requires cooking though, like, so things like this, raw vegetables, you can provide to people, but making hummus would be difficult without something to blend that together with. And that's where, providing people with prepared healthy foods like hummus would come into play. For people who might not have a kitchen but have access to something like a hot plate, you can do quite a bit. So for Mario and I were talking about kitchen remodels and what that's like to cook without a kitchen. You can do a lot actually with a hot plate and one pan if you have, access to, electricity. You still need access to that. But with that, you can take things that are, maybe slightly prepared. So, I'm not a big fan of highly processed food, but things like pre-cooked beans, especially if they are no salt or low sodium added, can be a really inexpensive and very portable and pre-cooked source for people. So you can take pre-cooked beans, you can actually mash them with, a spoon to make something that's not quite as smooth as this hummus, but some into a paste, at least if you want to have it that way. But you can use those beans. And if you have a heat source, you can make, veggie tacos, you can make soups, you can make a lot of different things. And so I think if we can solve the first problem is actually access to healthy ingredients. But, I'm really proud that our food bank does provide a lot of fresh ingredients that would really allow for someone to have a healthy diet. Get them those ingredients and then teach them very simple ways. So, my recipes, some of them are simple, very, very simple. Some of them are more complicated, but there are many things in there that you can kind of apply the principle. You can still have whole grains. So whole grains can come pre-cooked too, or you can have whole grain in the form of, whole grain bread. You can have raw vegetables and you can have pre-cooked beans. So even with all those limitations, there's still a way to do that.
Great. Well, I'll end with 2 comments and then a last question. One comment, someone said that UCSF actually does have a food pharmacy, so there's a place to direct patients there if and when needed, for, I guess, for the audience, for
Great.
folks that, to hear that. And then another is that one of our audience members was making the hummus along with you and said it was delicious, and it was the first time they had edamame, so they were really excited about that.
Thank you.
And then the last question or comment and question was, your cookbook is so inspiring. I imagine that there are some recipes that didn't make it to the final publication. If so, do you plan to share them before your next cookbook comes out?
I would love to have another cookbook. I think I need a few years break before that. And I do have a blog. So Spicebox Travels is my blog. I haven't really updated it much recently because I've been busy promoting this book. But you'll find a lot of other recipes that are not in the book on the blog as well, and on my other social media sites. So basically just kind of keep in touch with me. You'll get lots of recipes for free that are already out there. There's also a food for health blog that's run by Kaiser, which I'm a contributor to, which has a lot of the recipes as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda, for all the work you're doing and for taking time to chat with us tonight. It's been wonderful. And thank you to all of our alumni for all of your amazing questions. And we'll end the evening here. I think we have the slide to come back up with some more of the information about your event coming up on Saturday, which I said I'm going to try to make it to. But if not, there's other places to get copies of the book, and best of luck with everything that you have coming up.
Thank you so much, Mario, and thank you, Nancy, and to Jessica, who's doing the behind the scenes, and to our captioner. And yes, so these are all the places that you can find me. And again, this omnivore event is free. You don't have to buy the book, but if you do, I will sign it for you there. And I'll be preparing a few recipes from the book as samples there. So I hope to see you there. And just to reassure you, everybody there will be required to be vaccinated and wearing a mask. So it will be as safe as we can make it.
Great. Have a great night, everyone, and good night, Linda.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.